Hari Hari. So we are on chapter 1, text 14. Sanjaya is continuing to relate to Dhritarashtra what he is seeing on the battle of Kurukshetra, what is being revealed to him through the grace of his guru, Vyasadeva. Sanjaya describes, on the other hand, both Lord Krishna and Arjuna, stationed on a great chariot, drawn by white horses, sounded their transcendental conch shells. Number 15. Lord Krishna blew his conch shell called Panchajanya. Arjuna blew his, the Devadatta. And Bhima, the voracious eater and performer of Herculean tasks, blew his terrific conch shell called Poundra. So this is a wonderful, beautiful description of the Pandavas now responding to the blowing of the conchs of Bhishma and others on the Kaurava side. Now the Pandavas are blowing. But there's a very, very important and distinct difference. And that is the word divya, transcendental. When Krishna and Arjuna blew their conch shells, it's described as being transcendental. Madhava Pandavas Chaiva Divya Shanka Pradhadmatuhu. Divya, it was a transcendental sound. Whereas when the Kauravas and the Bhishma, even though the sound was tumultuous, vibrating, the Bhagavad Gita says, both in the sky and on the earth, it was still did not come close to measuring up to the divya, the transcendental sound vibrated by Krishna and Arjuna. So what is this transcendental sound? What is this divya sound? Let's explore that, because it's very essential that we understand what this transcendental refers to. What does it mean? Because it has great significance in our own life, in our own existence, as we try to achieve transcendence. There is triguna, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Triguna means the three modes of material nature, the three energies of material nature. Now, these three energies are throughout all material creation. Our food, the animals, our body, our mind, sound vibration, everything in this world, in this material creation, is a product of a mixture of these three energies. Our senses, everything is a combination, either a gross or subtle combination or manifestation of these three energies. Nothing in the material world is beyond these three energies, except that which is transcendental. These three energies begin, or rather, are characterized by a beginning, a middle, and an end. So everything in this material world, which comprises of these three energies, also have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So to transcend the modes of material nature, Krishna says in chapter 2, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna Nirdhanvo Nitya Satvasto Niryoga Kshema Atmavan. He says even the Vedas deal with how to exist in the three modes of material nature, how to exist in this world. Therefore, Arjuna, transcend the modes of material nature. Go even beyond the teachings of the Vedas, because much of the teachings are about this world. So transcending means going beyond what has a beginning, a middle, and an end. In other words, what is eternal and everlasting? That is transcendence. That which does not have a beginning, does not succumb to a demise. Obviously, there's a in between, there's existence, but does not have a beginning or an end. That is transcendence. That is divya. That is, in essence, Brahman. And that is Krishna, because Krishna is para Brahman. So how do we achieve or experience even transcendence? The wonderful example given throughout Vedic literature is of the spark and the fire. We are the individual, Jivatma is the spark. By reconnecting with the Supreme, by reconnecting with fire, we experience transcendence. Because it is within fire that we can exist and manifest, our full potential. It is when we are separate from fire, then we are conducive not to being extinguished. This Jivatma is never extinguished. This is where the example no longer applies. But the Jivatma can become covered by Triguna. When the living entity, when the Jivatma becomes covered by Triguna, then the spiritual spark becomes covered. It's kind of like growing up in Gurukula, we would have to do yajna every morning and every night. And in this particular Gurukula where I grew up, the fire of the yajna existed for about, I arrived there in 1986. The fire had been ongoing for about 4 years before that. And I think it has been only interrupted once up until this time. So the fire remains for decades. That's for the yajna. So we open the fire. The process is called opening the fire, where you start the fire and you have the yajna, you offer the oblations. And then at the end of the yajna, you tamp the wood, because you use a lot of wood, you tamp the wood down, and then you cover the wood over with ash. So there's nothing but ash around the fire. Now, beneath the fire, there are embers burning, absolutely, but it's completely covered with ash. So then you leave that night, the evening yajna, we go back to the ashram, we go to sleep, we wake up the next morning, 6 a.m., sunrise, we go back to the yajna shala, the yajna place, mandap, and we remove gently all of the ash, and the embers are revealed. We put a little more fresh wood on top, fan it a little bit, and the fire is reignited. After we perform the yajna, we tamp the wood down, put the ash back on top, and then go about our daily activities until the evening. And then we come again, brush the ash. This is how the Jivatma exists in the material world. We are covered by material nature, covered, conditioned by Triguna. So even though the Jivatma lives beneath the covering, there is no manifestation of fire. There's no manifestation of our transcendental spiritual nature. So in order to achieve and experience and to manifest our transcendental spiritual nature, there needs to be connection with the Supreme, a connection with Krishna, connection with Parabrahman. And then our manifestation of our transcendental nature is assured. And this does not mean after death. The body is going to die anyway. Transcendental, the body is, by definition, triguna. It will end. But our consciousness, being connected with the Supreme, retains its or manifests its spiritual nature and is therefore not bewildered by what Krishna calls sitoshna sukha dukkha dha. It is not bewildered by the dualities of this material world because the consciousness is transcendental. The consciousness is now Brahman realized. But in order for the consciousness to experience that and to manifest that, there needs to be yoga, connection. That is the purpose of yoga, not to stand on the head and do all of that. It is a connection with Parabrahman. And then our pure spiritual nature exists and manifests in transcendence. What is necessary for this to happen is control of the mind. If the mind is not controlled, then there is no possible way we can connect our consciousness with the Supreme. An uncontrolled mind, Krishna describes in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, an uncontrolled mind is our greatest enemy, not just on the spiritual level, but also on the material level. You cannot achieve anything in this world if we don't have basic control of our mind and senses. This is even more so for those of us who are trying to connect with the Supreme and manifest transcendence, our transcendental spiritual nature. So there must be control of the mind and, by extension, the senses, so that we can focus our mind and connect our mind with Parabrahman, with the Supreme. And in that reconnection with the jiva, with the Supreme, the spark with the fire, then we exist in a consciousness that is not bound by beginning and end. Even though we're living in this world, which is completely ruled by the principles of everything has a beginning, everything has an end. And we exist in this reality, not bewildered by those principles. This is what I like to call Christ consciousness. Prabhupada, the guru of the Hare Krishna ISKCON organization, calls it Krishna consciousness. It's the same thing. Conscious of the Supreme, conscious of Krishna, connected with Parabrahman. Christ was Krishna conscious. He was conscious. He was connected with his Father, with the Supreme. And therefore, he could be nailed to the cross and say, with absolute 100% honesty and truthfulness, forgive them. They know not what they do. One can only make such a statement if their consciousness is transcendental. So as we attempt to manifest our transcendental nature, let's not be confused and think it's some kind of magical, some kind of esoteric state of being. It's not. Nishayam yatma bhavaso jnana deepena bhasvata. When someone is situated in transcendence, they're situated in knowledge. They can exist without anxiety, without doubt. This is not, I'm not saying without pain, right? Christ experienced pain, but there was no anxiety in Christ in terms of his purpose, his being, who he was, his identity. There was no doubt. There was no anxiety in that regard. Pain comes and goes, just like pleasure. That's temporary, has a beginning, has an end. Sitoshna sukha dukkha da, like winter and summer, beginning and an end, comes and goes. That's irrelevant. In order for it to be irrelevant, we must be transcendental, but it is irrelevant. But this is not some esoteric state of being. It is simply the experience of knowledge, of knowing, of clarity, of meaning, of purpose. That's all it is. That is transcendence. When the spark is reunited with fire, there is no great esoteric revelation. There is just the sense of being situated where it's supposed to be. When a fish is in water, it is no esoteric experience. It is an experience of being. It's an experience of knowledge, of knowing, of contentment, of purpose. There is no doubt. The most wonderful expression of this is the idea or the visual given by this phrase. It is as if the sun lights up everything in the daytime. There is just clarity. There is complete and absolute clarity when we have connection with the Supreme. There is no doubts about what we should do, what we shouldn't do. Because when we have that connection with the Supreme, Krishna is in essence our Sarati, driving. We can commune with Krishna. We can converse with the Supreme. We are connected with the Supreme. We know how we can act in connection, in relation to, in accordance with the Supreme, without doubt. This is transcendence. And it is easy to corroborate this. If you're hearing, when you have this clarity, it is not about, if you're hearing voices thinking it's God, you're not. If you're hearing voices, you need to get yourself checked. Let's make that very, very clear. You're not going to be hearing voices. But there will be total and complete clarity. And with that clarity, you will be able to corroborate that clarity through Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. A particular issue. A person who is connected with the Supreme on a particular, when a particular issue arises, and they have that clarity, their consciousness is connected with the Supreme. They have transcended Triguna. And the Supreme, Krishna, has given Didami Buddhi Yogamtam. Krishna has given the knowledge by which we can stay connected with him. Then the answers that come can be corroborated by our Guru, by the Shastras, and the other devotees, the other spiritualists around us. Easily corroborated by all three. These three, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, will echo the clarity we're experiencing in our existence. When our mind is connected with the Supreme, when the spiritual spark of our being is connected with the fire that is Krishna. So when Krishna and Arjuna are blowing their transcendental conch shells, the sound vibration, one could say, it's the same. But the significance of Krishna and Arjuna blowing their conch shells, the significance of it being transcendental, is because the mission, the purpose of Krishna, Parabrahma, is based on eternality. Whereas the strength of the Kauravas is based on Triguna. Beginning, middle, and an end. Hari Hari.